Hello there, everyone. Today's story comes straight from my life. My wife, Linda, recently confessed to cheating with a coworker over a decade ago, back when we were just live-in partners with a little 2-year-old boy toddling around. It all happened 11 years ago, back when I was just 27 and she was around 30. At that time, we had been together for about 8 years as live-in partners, with our son who was 2 years old. Now, at 38, I'm looking back at nearly 2 decades with Linda, who's 41. We've been officially married for 11 years and have 2 more kids, an energetic 8-year-old son and a charming 6-year-old daughter. English isn't my first language, so I hope you'll bear with any slip-ups. Over those first 8 years living together, Linda and I weathered plenty of storms but managed to hold fast to each other. Despite the rocky times, we seemed to have a solid relationship with no significant issues, and we were really close. Before meeting Linda, I had just ended a 4-year relationship because my ex was unfaithful, which made trusting someone new extremely tough. Interestingly, Linda had briefly dated someone for about a month right before we got serious. They never really had a chance to establish a deep connection since she moved to my area for work right after accepting him. What struck me was that she agreed to be with me while she was technically still with him. She eventually went back and officially ended things with him for my sake, which was supposed to be reassuring. It's been hard to trust completely, but living together and having our son helped me to gradually let my guard down, especially since Linda seemed so devoted to our family. She was an incredibly caring partner and mother, always busy with our child, which eased my worries about her fidelity. The turning point came when she decided to rejoin the workforce. At that time, I had paused my job to focus on finishing my last year in college. We agreed that my mother would look after our son while Linda worked, given that my mother lived in a different area, a day's journey away. We stayed at my mother's place for a month before heading back. Our arrangement seemed to work well. Linda was busy at work, and I was immersed in my studies. 6 months later, I traveled alone to bring our son back home, leaving Linda alone in our apartment for 3 weeks. During this period, problems began to emerge linked to Linda's work environment. She started going out frequently with her colleagues, who liked to unwind with drinks after work. This led to numerous fights between us. Linda became noticeably more entitled and stubborn, always dismissing my concerns about her nightlife. She insisted she was just out with friends and her cousins, who also happened to be her coworkers, so she was safe. But I had my doubts. We kept in touch daily through calls and texts, so I didn't suspect anything out of the ordinary at the time. However, upon my return with our son, I noticed Linda was unusually affectionate and more passionate in the bedroom than usual. At first, I thought she was just compensating for the time we spent apart. So I decided to let it slide, eager to believe the best. However, about a month later, I stumbled upon a text message on Linda's phone. Driven by a nagging sense of curiosity, I read the message. It was from a colleague of hers. What chilled me was her response. "He's texting me here. My living partner might read it." My heart sank, and a cold sweat broke over me as I felt a sharp pang of betrayal. Linda rushed over, trying to snatch the phone from my hands, but I kept it out of her reach. I demanded to know who the hell this guy was that she was hiding messages about me from. Cool as ice, she claimed he was nobody and said she needed to head to her sister's to get her hair done for the company Christmas party that evening. I wasn't having any of it. I told her she couldn't take her phone with her. After she left, I replied to the number, and to my surprise, it was the guy's partner on the other end. She revealed that she suspected our partners were having an affair. The text I'd found that morning only added fuel to her suspicions. We agreed to meet in person, so I could read the exchange between Linda and her affair partner myself. Before heading out, I dropped our son off at Linda's sister's place, where she was getting her hair done. I informed Linda I needed to meet someone, and that she had some serious explaining to do upon my return. When I met her affair partner's girlfriend, she let me pore over all their messages. She even told me about a night her partner didn't come home, a night he was allegedly seen out dancing and drinking with Linda, looking much more than just friends. This had happened during those 3 weeks I was away at my mother's place with our son. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. The girlfriend confronted Linda at work, but Linda dismissed it, claiming they were just friends and he had only given her a ride home because she couldn't find a cab. I couldn't swallow that story. Neither could his girlfriend. After thanking her and apologizing for the mess, I went home, filled with a turmoil of emotions, and confronted Linda after she returned from the Christmas party. It was an intense and painful conversation. I pleaded with her to tell me the truth, but she stuck to her story that nothing happened that night. I felt so betrayed and foolish for having been drawn into such a mess. I was furious, and thoughts of leaving crossed my mind. Yet we stayed together, primarily for our son. Linda kept insisting nothing more had happened, and the guy had just dropped her off at our gate. Deep down, I knew there was more to the story, but I chose to accept her words and move on. It was around that time that I fell ill and needed her care, which forced me to push these suspicions from my mind. Linda continued working for another year before she finally resigned. Linda told me she hadn't spoken to him at work since that event, claiming she avoided him completely, even before our confrontation, and had totally ignored him at work. I was somewhat inclined to believe her, as I had access to all her devices at that time, and she had stopped going out for drinks with her colleagues after work. Then, 2 years later, I heard that the guy had died in a motorcycle accident. Linda seemed completely unfazed by the news, showing no signs of distress, which convinced me that perhaps we had truly moved on. That same year, she got pregnant with our second son, and we decided to tie the knot. Everything seemed to normalize. However, every now and then during our arguments, I would bring up her now deceased affair partner to gain the upper hand. Each time, Linda would become fiercely defensive, sharply telling me to let the man rest in peace. A year later, she was pregnant with our youngest, and life seemed to return to its usual rhythm. But about a month ago, we had another heated argument, and I brought up the topic again. Linda lost her temper and snapped at me, demanding when I would finally stop dredging up the past. Something about her reaction that day made me push harder. I lied to her, saying someone saw them arrive at our apartment that night and that he stayed until morning, his motorcycle parked outside. I had fabricated this story to link it to the night he supposedly just dropped her off and left immediately. I had never mentioned this lie to her before. She was visibly shaken and immediately demanded to know who had told me this and why I was only hearing about it now. I lied again, claiming it was a new friend from the neighborhood whom she hadn't met. Then she got defensive and admitted, yes, she had let him inside, but only because he asked for a glass of water. Noticing the shift in her story, I pressed on, asking how long he had stayed. She claimed it was just a couple of minutes, but I countered, asserting that my friend saw his motorcycle parked there until morning. Now she began hyperventilating. I pushed further, asking if they had been intimate that night. She broke down, admitting they had kissed, and there was some fondling because she was drunk, but insisted that was all. She claimed he had made advances, but she had refused, thinking of me. Tears welled up as she pleaded that nothing more had happened. We went around in circles, with her continuously denying anything further. Then, I had an idea. I told her I would believe whatever she was telling me, that nothing more happened. But I challenged her, saying that here I was, at my most vulnerable, and she could look me in the eyes and swear that what she was saying was true. I would accept it and believe her, but if she was lying, I would remain the most miserable man in the world, suffering from the pain of her deceit. I let a few tears escape as I stared into her eyes, and added that if she had even a shred of respect and love left for her husband, it would hurt her too to lie again in front of my face in such a vulnerable moment. There was a heaviness in the air as I told her, if there's anything else you need to confess, now's the time. I'll forgive you if you just apologize for what you've done. I offered her a sort of amnesty, hoping she would finally lay it all out. With tears streaming down her face, Linda broke down and confessed that it did happen. That night, she had let him have his way with her right there on our sofa. I pressed for details, asking how long it lasted. She said it was only 3 to 5 minutes. He didn't finish because she snapped back to her senses, pushed him off, and berated him furiously. When he inquired what went wrong, she blamed him entirely. She told me how she realized the gravity of her mistake and feared how devastated I would be if I found out. He had the audacity to ask her to let him finish, suggesting he might face some consequences if he didn't, but she refused and demanded he leave immediately. After he left, she said she cried uncontrollably and took the longest shower of her life, feeling utterly defiled. Linda claimed he had initially coerced her by kissing and fondling, whispering that I was far away, and nobody would know unless someone talked. He insisted he wouldn't get her pregnant and became more forceful, which frightened her into submission. In her confusion and fear, she felt giving in was the only way to end the ordeal. She tried to dissociate, focusing her thoughts on me while he took advantage of her. She admitted that she didn't feel much physically because she was numbed by alcohol and his own inadequacies. Her confession shook me to the core, turning my world upside down, but I resolved to keep my promise to forgive her. We ended our conversation there and decided to go to bed. Despite her attempts to assure me, Linda expressed fear that her confession might change how I saw her, possibly leading to our separation. I reassured her, saying we'd face this together step by step, though internally, I was reeling. That night, Linda tried to make amends physically. She was the active participant while I felt largely disconnected. I hardly slept, my mind racing with the details she'd shared. The next day I sought to clarify certain aspects of her story, but she stuck to her narrative, apologizing for what had happened and pledging to do anything for my forgiveness and to prevent me from leaving. She revealed that the years of lying had taken a severe toll on her, leading to anxiety and depression as the guilt consumed her. Linda insisted that she had lied all these years because she didn't want to hurt me and feared the destruction it would bring to our family, especially affecting our children. She knew how deeply she had betrayed and eroded my trust by letting him into our home and succumbing to that moment of weakness, which she regretted profoundly, calling it a grave mistake. Linda insisted that the whole incident wasn't premeditated. He just exploited her vulnerability that night. She was adamant that there were no feelings of love towards him, labeling it a regrettable mistake. She even mentioned wanting to confide in her sister and pondered whether she could report him for taking advantage of her, but fear of my reaction had previously held her back. As I mulled over her words, my trust waned. I couldn't shake the feeling that there might have been more between them. When pressed, she admitted that, due to their work assignments, they spent a lot of time together, and he often showed her attention, like bringing her food and checking if she had eaten. She confessed to harboring slight feelings for him, stirred perhaps by the attention he gave, but she insisted it was nothing deep, certainly not love. I asked her directly if she was attracted to him, and she denied it, claiming it was merely the companionship and attention she appreciated, nothing more. Since the day she confessed, D-Day as I call it, we were ostensibly doing okay, keeping up appearances for the kids' sake and maintaining the status quo at home. However, I told her I was still deciding on our future and that I hadn't forgiven her. I had thought I could easily forgive if she confessed, but I realized forgiveness wasn't something I could grant so readily. I'm only human, and the process was harder than I anticipated. We started what I call sharing therapy every night before bed, a practice where we each took turns to speak our thoughts without interruption, reflecting on them silently until the next session. This routine was grounded in absolute honesty. During these sessions, Linda provided a timeline of their interactions, recounting their lunches, conversations, and even the moment he suggested she leave me for him. I shared my feelings in return, and this exchange unearthed details that hadn't come out on D-Day. These revelations have led to episodes of deep hurt, where anger and pain grip me as I dwell on those details. But there's also relief in knowing the full extent of what happened, replacing my previous imaginings with concrete facts. Linda is supportive during these painful episodes, understanding my need for clarity and adhering to the conditions I've set for our reconciliation. I was surprised that her pride didn't obstruct this process. She's endured much, only drawing the line at the thought of me finding someone else. Now our life is a mix of good days and bad, but I find myself able to stay with her and look at her without the constant overshadow of betrayal, though the pain resurfaces occasionally when I recall that night. Is it normal to still feel this way, even though her affair partner has long since passed away? I still feel jealous and deeply hurt because of him. It still pains me when I watch videos and see anything that remotely resembles the position that my wife and her affair partner used during that fateful night. This lingering question haunts me. Is there still a chance for me to fully forgive her for everything that happened? Does she truly deserve a second chance? Her lover has been dead for 11 years, and she's had all this time to eliminate any possible evidence. It seems I'm left with only two options: to believe her version of the story or to continue doubting. What really troubles me is what might have happened before she took him home. I doubt it was as simple as having a wild night out and then deciding to bring him home. There were likely emotional and probably physical interactions happening long before that night. The girlfriend of the man involved told me that someone saw them together looking very intimate, which clearly suggests that something was happening even before the night he ended up at our place. It's puzzling to consider why a man, who supposedly had no emotional ties to my now wife and only experienced one unsuccessful sexual encounter with her, an encounter he had to plead to continue, would ask my wife to leave me for him. This is typically a plea of a lover deeply involved in an intense, passionate affair, not someone engaged in a failed attempt at intimacy. Did they use protection that night? Linda never mentioned it, and it seems she wasn't concerned about my health or the risk of transmitting an STD. What's even more troubling is the continued contact. A month after I returned, which is about 4 weeks or 28 days after their encounter, she was still in contact with him. This was evidenced by the message I saw. "Stop texting me here, my partner might read it." If her story were true, I would have expected her to respond with something like, "Stop contacting me. I don't want to hear from you ever again. Leave me alone." Or she would have simply blocked him, but instead, she asked him to text her on a different line. One I wouldn't notice. I will never know the full truth. Only she holds that knowledge. But the story she tells just doesn't add up. There's still a lot to unpack here. There are unresolved issues and questions that need addressing. I'm struggling to fully believe what she's claimed happened, but it's also possible that it did happen just as she described, and she's not merely trying to evade responsibility. Update. We are still working on reconciling, and I've realized that time is a significant factor in handling all of this. I've decided to stay and give our relationship another chance, but not without some changes to our arrangement. We agreed that I have one pass to engage in another relationship, which I can use anytime I feel she isn't serious about our reconciliation. The only stipulation is that she must be informed about it. She is now completely transparent with all her devices and has promised to alert me if anyone at work or elsewhere makes advances towards her, allowing us to address such issues promptly. She understands that she must avoid any situations that could lead to infidelity or even cause me to suspect her again, because she knows this is her second chance, and there won't be a third. She is doing her utmost to aid our reconciliation, showing genuine remorse and regret for the mistake that hurt our relationship. We continue to live as normally as possible with our kids. The deep hurt episodes do occur when memories surface, but they're not as overwhelming as they were right after D-Day. However, I still make it clear to her how her actions shattered my trust. I've tasked her with certain actions to help both of us cope, to which she has willingly complied, except for one major request. We have kept our issues private from everyone else. None of our family members are aware of what happened. I believe that the root of her infidelity was selfishness, and to test her resolve and commitment to change, I proposed a challenge that I know she dreads. Given her high regard for her reputation among our friends and family, I asked her to confess her infidelity to both our parents. We agreed they would keep this confidential and also seek their advice on our reconciliation. When I first mentioned this test, her reaction was profoundly genuine. The sheer horror in her eyes upon realizing that our parents would learn about her mistake confirmed her fear. She insists this is the hardest thing I've asked of her, pleading for a different test, preferring to keep our issues between ourselves. However, I've stood firm, explaining that confronting her selfishness head-on is essential. By confessing to our parents, she would be making a significant sacrifice for the sake of our relationship, potentially overcoming the selfishness that led to her betrayal. I thought about requiring her to confess to our entire circle of family and friends, but ultimately, I chose to limit the disclosure to just our parents. This decision was made partly to preserve her dignity among others, since we are trying to reconcile and she remains the mother of my children. I needed her to demonstrate her willingness to make what she considers the ultimate sacrifice. After some reluctance, she agreed but requested some time to prepare herself to confess to her parents first, and then to mine. I explained to her that if she followed through with this, I would view it as a significant step forward in our healing process, a real victory for our reconciliation. I assured her that once she completed this task, I would relinquish my pass to have another relationship and refocus entirely on her and our family. I committed to being her partner fully once again, and to moving beyond the chaos she caused. However, I made it very clear to her, while I can forgive her for the sake of moving forward, I will never forget the act of infidelity. Cheating is something I find fundamentally unforgivable and unacceptable in any relationship. For those who have navigated similar situations and chosen to reconcile, I wonder what tests or proofs you found necessary to affirm that your marriage was still worth another chance. I've considered many factors. Our children, the life we've built over 19 years, even though she deceived me for more than half of it, and my feelings towards her now. I believe she is genuinely remorseful and regrets her past mistake deeply. She has since devoted herself to our family. Thankfully, all my children are confirmed to be mine through DNA tests, and we are both clear of any STDs. Despite the pain of her 11-year deception, I acknowledge that she lied to try to keep our family intact. It's tough being cheated on and lied to, but as I mentioned earlier, time plays a significant role in how one copes with life's challenges. Life encompasses more than just dwelling on its negative aspects. I'm aware that not every new beginning is the right solution for everyone. To all the betrayed spouses out there, especially men who feel a unique kind of solitude in their pain, I understand your suffering. It's okay to let your emotions show. My hope is that we all find the peace we seek and that we can learn to trust and love fully once again. Well, it seems like a seemingly happy conclusion for my wife. She managed to have her cake and eat it too, taking responsibility only after enjoying her indiscretions. My wife didn't just slip up, she deliberately betrayed me and meticulously hid her liaisons. Perhaps calling it a mistake is my way of cushioning the blow, but I need to face the reality of her deliberate actions. The notion of a free pass as part of our reconciliation has been met with mixed feelings. Some suggest that pursuing such a course might only bring guilt and shame, rather than healing. An eye for an eye isn't always the answer, as the saying goes, but the complexity of emotions and trust involved makes the right path forward unclear. Update. It's been over 3 months since D-Day, and my wife has confessed to both sets of parents. Her parents were deeply disappointed, yet it was clear they hoped we would resolve our issues for the sake of the children. I felt a certain satisfaction that she went through with it, despite the difficulty. I had prepared my own parents by summarizing the affair before she spoke with them. They accepted her apology, but emphasized that she must work hard to rebuild my trust, advising that the children should remain unaware of the affair. However, I have reservations about whether she disclosed all the necessary details to her parents. While I was in another room during her confession, their subsequent avoidance of the subject left me questioning the depth of her honesty. I understand their discomfort, given the sensitive nature of the topic, but a more open discussion might have been reassuring. She assured me she had told them everything, including the physical aspects of her affair, and they were shocked, but advised her similarly to my parents, emphasizing resolving the issue for the children's sake. Despite these steps toward reconciliation, I still struggle with feelings of hurt and betrayal, especially when triggered by certain reminders of the affair. Although the confessions to our parents were a significant step forward, the emotional scars remain. I've retained my free pass and might consider using it discreetly if I feel it necessary. Additionally, I've been applying what I call the true remorse test, a set of 6 conditions to gauge genuine remorse. So far, she has met 3, showing patience, taking responsibility by confessing to our parents, and demonstrating financial support and accountability. This process is still unfolding, and while there are signs of progress, the journey of healing and potentially rebuilding trust is long and fraught with complexity. I continue to seek advice and perspectives to navigate this challenging path, hoping to find a way forward that respects both our dignity and our shared history. She's still working on demonstrating her full honesty, her proactive approach to reconciliation, and her overall attitude towards me and the children. If she convinces me on the remaining conditions of the true remorse test, while maintaining the 3 she's already met, then I will be able to truly believe in her remorse. Recently, she made some additional confessions, revealing details she had initially withheld about the night of the affair. A significant new disclosure was that the affair partner might have partially ejaculated inside her. She reacted quickly by pushing him off as soon as she realized what was happening. She was furious because he had tried to complete the act inside her, despite their explicit agreement to the contrary. She mentioned being on birth control pills at the time, which added another layer of complexity to the incident. She argued that her experience allowed her to anticipate his actions, disturbingly referencing her familiarity from our time together. Her attempt to explain sounded unbelievable to me, but she insisted that she was laying everything out in the open, with no more secrets. It's incredibly tough for me to hear these details, but she assures me that's the entire truth of what happened. She acknowledges that whether he finished completely or not doesn't change the pain it causes me, and she expressed deep regret for her actions that night. She's committed to being completely transparent and honest, hoping to uncover and share anything else she might have forgotten as part of her commitment to full disclosure. Currently, I am still far from okay. The triggers are frequent and overwhelming, and I find myself without a clear path forward. I'm uncertain if our reconciliation efforts will be successful. The process is draining, and while I appreciate her attempts to be transparent, each new detail adds to the complexity of my feelings. It's a continuous struggle to determine whether rebuilding our relationship is possible or even desirable under these circumstances. As I contemplate the possibility of separation, I can't help but worry about how our kids would handle it, especially our daughter. The thought of breaking their hearts is agonizing. The idea of becoming a broken family is something I struggle with deeply. Her story evolved from nothing happened to just kissing and fondling, then to yes, we had sex but he didn't finish, and now to he did finish partially inside me. Each revelation has only come after significant pressure from me, making me feel like I'm constantly unearthing more lies. Now she claims she's fully honest, but how can I trust this when every truth seems dragged out of her? Furthermore, I have doubts about whether she was completely truthful with her parents, given her pattern of partial disclosures with me. It also raises questions about her cousins who worked with her. How could they not have noticed anything if they were so close? Why did she continue working in the same place for another year instead of quitting immediately to focus on repairing our marriage? She exposed me and potentially our children to STDs, yet continued to have children with me, fully aware of the depth of betrayal and disrespect she showed. This situation begs a hard look at what staying together for the kids truly means. It's crucial for me to become healthy and happy to be a good father, but that doesn't necessarily require staying with her. I plan to get a full range of STD tests and to DNA test all our children to ensure no further secrets are lurking. This will protect our family and provide a clear path forward, regardless of the personal outcomes between us. Honestly, I don't believe she has told me the whole truth. Her story has changed too many times. What's best for the children is to be around parents who are supportive and happy, not merely together. Kids are perceptive, and they sense unhappiness. Why should they grow up in an environment where their parents may end up resenting each other? They deserve a healthy, loving atmosphere, not one marred by toxicity and mistrust. What do you think? Should I stay or should I go? I'm open to advice.